Hi everyone, for today's book review we're going to be checking out this book, Some Ship Disasters and Their Causes by K.C. Barnaby. Don't be put off by the fact that this book is quite old. It was published in 1968, which, when you think about it, the QE2 was still on the stocks back then. This book is written with authority. K.C. Barnaby was for 30 years the chief architect at John Thornycroft & Co. and has written several books about naval architecture. And so what he decided to do was to take his skills and apply his knowledge of shipbuilding and ship behavior towards analyzing a bewildering array of shipwrecks. Dozens of ships and their sinkings are covered in this book. The book is divided up into several chapters. Some of them are thematic. So, for example, ship fires are looked at, and you've got wrecks such as the Lacona, the Atlantique. You have ships sunk by collision, so some of the famous ones, such as the Andrea, Doria, and the Empress of Ireland. But then you have the lesser-known ones, such as the sinking of the Egypt and the Shillong. You then have special types of ships that are given their own chapter. So tanker wrecks, car ferry wrecks. And with car ferries, it's incredible that he points out the obvious faults of having an unprotected open car deck, which leads ships to capsizing and sinking. And this is in 1968. This is when the wreck of the Heraclean and the Princess Victoria were the key car ferry disasters. Fast forward 20-30 years later, and we now have the sinkings of the Herald of Free Enterprise and the Estonia. Clearly the lessons were not learnt. We also have discussions about, I've talked about collisions, fires, storms. We have sailing ships, particularly sail training ships, such as the Pamir and the Copenhagen. And then we also have dangerous ships, so vessels such as the HMS Captain with its extremely low freeboard. The poor Waratah is also included in here, which anecdotally apparently had a very low center of gravity, causing it to be a tender ship, and various others. So there's plenty here. If you think you know all the shipwrecks, you don't. And this book is actually a great eye-opener and introduction to some of the other lesser-known wrecks. The writing style is detached and analytical, which is understandable considering his background, but also this is exactly the type of format that he wanted. He wanted to write a book that was informed, that was purely about the facts of what was known and how the failings of ship building and ship construction led to various wrecks. And also how ship structure either mitigated or contributed to losses such as capsizing, burning, whatnot. It's a fascinating book. I quite enjoyed learning about some of the lesser-known wrecks, and it's enlightening to read about disasters from a almost clinical point of view. And even though the writing style is detached, he's still not afraid to throw in some of his opinions, and in particular, as an architect, his opinions about the way ships look is hilarious, and I'll read it out to you. So, let's find it. Oh yes. So, I am quoting from his chapter about the Andrea Doria, and he was clearly a fan of this ship. So, he says of the Andrea Doria, her appearance from all angles was superb. The shear line, the massing up of the terraced superstructure, and the positioning of the single funnel were exactly right. So often, the appearance of an otherwise pleasing profile is ruined when viewed from some special angle. The impressive United States, for example, is frankly hideous when seen end on as she appears, all funnel. I would love to know what his thoughts would be about some of the floating monstrosities of today, the giant balcony-clad / shopping trolley-esque cruise ships. So putting that aside, it's just fun reading his clinical perspectives on some of these wrecks. Naturally, Titanic gets mentioned here as well, and even though his insights about the ship's structure and commending Harland and Wolff and Thomas Andrews for building a essentially solid and sturdy ship, this is 1968, so it was still considered that the ship had been ripped open by a 300-foot hole, which as we now know was not the case. Even though the writing style tends to be, like I said, detached, it's still easy to read. If you know your difference between your bow, your stern, your starboard, and your port, you'll be fine. When he does go into a discussion about some more technical elements, such as scantlings, there's an appendix at the back which has a discussion about what each term means, so that everything is put into proper context. Also, being an older book, the amount of photos included are less. There's about 4 or 5 photo sections, which are usually 2 or 3 pages with 2 photos each, and you can see them up here in the corner. They illustrate most, not all, but most of the ships that are included in this book. Otherwise, the book is all text. But it's an informative and enlightening read. If you can find a copy of this in a second-hand bookstore, particularly if you're in the Northern Hemisphere where the postage rates are a little more affordable, then this is definitely worth checking out. After 60 years, some of the commentary may seem out of date, particularly with wrecks such as the Titanic, yet with his commentary about the wrecks of car ferries, it's just tragic that the obvious flaws of open car decks, still cause disasters. So do check this book out. For me, this is a 3 captain's hats. It is informative. It is certainly fascinating to get an naval architectural perspective on different wrecks. And it's also great to read about some of the lesser known wrecks that actually get almost as much coverage as some of the more famous ones. So there you have it. If you find it in a second-hand bookstore, go on, get it, have a good read, and learn about some of the other lesser known wrecks, and get an appreciation of how ships perform in a variety of shipwreck circumstances. And if there are any other books about shipwrecks or shipwreck types, capsizing, fires, storms, whatnot, let me know in the comments below, and I'm sure I can find a book that relates to them and review it for you. So until next time, enjoy and happy reading, everyone.